your podcast app. You'll see there's a discourse happening. Is this book a masterpiece or problematic? One's a lifelong diehard fan, the other's a first-time reader. Both are really smart and funny and attractive. Sweet feather, sweet feather, titans and hierarchy. Sweet feather, sweet feather, relentless focus on their body. Sweet feather, sweet feather, what do they mean by all American? Sweet feather, sweet feather, no sex, just titillation.
Okay, so listeners, Pardo and I were trying to schedule today's conversation, and she said that she wanted to do it today rather than tomorrow because she couldn't wait to talk about the book. And I'd love to open today with just a little bit of Pardo, what were you so excited about? What got your gears going? What gets your motor running, etc.?
I just meant to talk to you. I don't care if it's not the book. This book could have been blank.
That is what was so confusing to me.
It's not, it could have been blank. Like, there is some stuff, but I mean, we'll get to it with this. And I already have my 6-word review. But it wasn't much. But guess what? What this book lacks in things that are interesting or new about it.
Yeah.
The cover ain't too shabby for Becky. And I don't think the cover's going to be too shabby for Robert.
Okay. I do have to let you know that you texted me before I had really gotten into the meat of the book.
Oh no.
And so
you were expecting it to be big.
The whole book, I'm like, what is she can't wait to talk about that. This book, nothing happened. And so I kept trying to be like, ooh, maybe that's a big thing. Oh, maybe and nothing. There is no big thing, my friend. Nothing happens.
Wow.
But so it really colored my perception. And I think that's interesting.
That is interesting. I'm sorry, I didn't realize I was giving you that signal, but I understand why you thought that. But I'm more just I like talking, it's fun. I like talking about the books, regardless of what book it is.
Do we want to cliffhang from the book before?
I think we should do 6-word reviews first. Okay, mine is, our national nightmare is finally over. And you could take maybe a guess or a gander to what I refer. Or I could just tell you.
Well, I don't want you to color my 6-word.
So, I mean, of course, one 6-word always colors the other 6-word. Unless we always have them prepared in advance, but usually we don't. And we're flexible here at Becky Co. So if you want to make it 7, if you want to make it 5, you go right ahead. I won't be about it.
Robert. The word you're searching for is Robert.
You look so handsome when you're thinking of your 6 words. You really do, more than usual. I know I tell you every day.
Very kind. I should think more. Maybe that would make people. Did I ever tell you that a therapist? The first time I cried in front. This is my therapist at Brandeis. Actually,
no. Alert! I'm scared. What?
I was crying, and she goes, "Has anybody ever told you you're really beautiful when you cry?"
Psychotic. That's psychotic. Did you report it? Please.
No, please. Are you kidding? Someone told me I was beautiful. Yeah, I reported it to anyone who would listen as a plus.
You reported it in your eyes and ears column at Brandeis.
Yeah,
oh my God. What would that have been called? I don't know. It would be called Hoots and Howls. It would be called Hoots and Hollers. Hoots and Hollers.
Absolutely be called Hoots and Hollers. Oh, that's so good.
Hoots and Hollers.
Listeners, of course but I'll remind you that the mascot of Brandeis is the judge, but the unofficial mascot of Brandeis is the owl. Hoots
named, of
and
course.
Hollers. Ollie.
Named, of course. Thank you.
Okay. My 6-word review.
Also the name of the character in Saltburn.
Yeah, we can't.
Very stupid movie.
Somebody was just trying to tell me
I
how
liked
good
the
it
bathtub.
was.
I liked when he was like...
Yeah, we know you did, Becky.
But then when he started, putting his boner in the grave, I said, you know what? I'm gonna go ahead and close tab on this one.
You said, enough is enough.
I said, you know what? I think I get what we're doing here. Listen, it was no mother, exclamation point, put it that way. In other words, this is the first and last time you're gonna be hearing about it on this show. Want to hear something crazy I learned recently?
Wait, sorry. I just need one moment to get back to equilibrium before I throw up from laughing so hard. Can I just have a brief moment? Sorry, before you get into that. So do you mean that you didn't finish Saltburn because you actually closed the tab when he's fucking the grave?
No, I absolutely kept watching.
Okay.
And the ending was really stupid. But I loved Pike and I loved the main guy.
Oh, Rosamund Pike is just a treasure.
And I also loved seeing all the, of course, Oxford campus cinematography. Of course, Oxford is the most magical place.
Have you been there?
Robert. You know, it's not important who's been there and in what capacity or but you know, some of us have and some of us haven't, and that may or may not be the way we think about the world. Those who kind of have had a stint and you know, those who have only kind of been on little trivia game shows, little TV.
Those are the two genders. People who've been to Oxford and people who've been on Jeopardy. That's it.
Yeah, and if they won or if they've kind of
no, it's just been on. There are only two genders. Oxford
and the winning, the not winning, we don't worry about that.
We don't even think about it ever.
Do you have your 6-word review?
I mean, you may imagine it's been hard for me to kind of formulate my thoughts what with everything that's happening. I've got it. Bad teacher Elizabeth almost ruins everything.
I love and I agree. Oh, I mean, we're really gonna have to get into it with the way Elizabeth chooses to kind of support people.
Yeah, we do. What was our national nightmare? Oh, the Centennial Picnic, of course.
Just the Centennial Celebration period. The Sweet Valley Centennial Celebration is something that we've been hearing about for way too many books. I was thrilled to see Jessica's role in it and her very successful execution. And of course, we'll absolutely drag Elizabeth all day long for the comparison. Like, thank God, to my knowledge, this is it. Like, you would think that there's going to be a book of like Bruce's perspective on the Centennial because he like felt like he was so stressed about it and all this stuff. But it's like literally all we saw of it was the picnic. I'm like, where was the beauty pageant?
Yeah,
I'm like, you. So, but anyhow, I'm glad to be done with it. Cliffhanger?
Let's hang off that cliff together. They're at, of course, the post-hostage party. And we're just celebrating the fact that Regina and her family have been freed from hostage situation.
Yeah, long story short, they may or may not have been, quote unquote, held hostage. I believe they were not, but you can go to the last episode for that. But everyone's all happy, so they're having a nice party.
And we overhear Ken talking to Suzanne. Listeners, don't get excited. It is not Suzanne, call me Susie, everyone does, Devlin, who had a real kind of change of heart. Instead, it is a different
Wait,
Susie.
Stop. You literally just... Oh, no, you didn't. Sorry. We already recorded Special Christmas. You didn't spoil it for them. I got confused.
Because one easy way to remember is I can't spoil because I don't know anything new. That's like kind of an easy rule of thumb. Is like Robert can never spoil because the only spoilers Robert knows they learned from Becky inadvertently.
Okay.
This Suzanne is a sophomore whom everyone has described as stuck up. She's sometimes called, although in the actual text of our book this week, she is not, but in this book, when they're talking about her, they call her Suzanne Hands-Off Hanlon. And so we overhear Ken and Suzanne talking. We're getting season tickets to the symphony from my father, Suzanne was going on. And Ken's so interested in poetry, too. He completely disproves the theory that football players can't be cultured, too. Ken hung his head, not saying a word. Gee, Ken, one of the crowd remarked, you think all that culture is going to help us win the big game against Palisades? Oh, who cares about that? Come on, let's get some punch. A brief silence followed, and Elizabeth watched in amazement as Suzanne pulled Ken along with her. Elizabeth frowned. She hadn't liked Suzanne's tone of voice at all. I just hope Ken knows what he's getting into, Elizabeth thought, stepping back to join a circle of friends on the patio. The Ken Matthews she knew certainly didn't prefer classical music and poetry to football. She just hoped Ken wasn't in for complete rehabilitation from the very opinionated Suzanne Hanlon. Poor Ken, Elizabeth sighed as she walked inside the house. He was failing English, facing getting kicked off the team, and apparently in for a crash course in culture from hands-off Hanlon herself. Will Suzanne succeed in changing Ken? Find out in Sweet Valley High number 27, Lovestruck. And this cliffhanger may sound familiar to readers in the past. There are so many books, it feels like, that end with Elizabeth remarking to herself how a certain couple shouldn't be together.
Mm-hmm.
I think it happened at the end of the book before Too Much in Love, where she's thinking like, oh, Bill and Dee Dee, that's not great. When Regina and Bruce Patman, Bruce 1 got together, she loves to end a book thinking, oh, those two people, I wouldn't put them together, so they shouldn't be together.
You could say it's one of her favorite things to worry about. The A-plot is Suzanne and Ken have recently started dating. Everyone is observing the thing Robert just said. Not only does it seem that they're quote unquote so different, because how can, a highbrow person be with a football lowbrow person who likes burgers and not this and that, so there's that piece of it. But then also this sense that like she's to some extent like trying to change him or doesn't accept him for who he is a concern. And we see pretty quickly that Suzanne is not accepting of Ken as he is. For example, his love for football. He feels uncomfortable and with her family and feels this kind of pressure and so on. Ken is like infatuated with Suzanne very clearly and is experiencing this discomfort and basically like goes on a journey for a while. He makes kind of these like sacrifices and does things that are not good for himself in order to like please her, and then ultimately realizes that that's not what he wants to do, and in the end he honors himself and breaks up with her.
Great. Ken Matthews is failing English. He needs to pick his grades up so that he can play in the big game against Palisades. Is this a game that is important? Well, depends on what you mean by important, because it is certainly an exhibition game. So no, it doesn't count towards standings or matter in any kind of way that way. But it does matter a lot in terms of pride because it is the big centennial football game. And he needs to write one short story for Collins for English. And if he writes a good enough short story, he will pass English and can play football. Liz offers to help him. The way she helps him is she talks to him for 30 seconds about a short story and then gives him a copy of a short story that she has written with her notes and outline and everything so that he can kind of observe the process of writing a short story and then write his own short story. Ken ends up running out of time and just takes the title page off of Elizabeth's short story and puts his own title page on the short story and turns it into Collins. He thinks this will be a victimless crime because Elizabeth says repeatedly she has never shown anyone else this short story. Collins thinks it is so good that he nominates it for the school newspaper, and the school newspaper wants to print it. And then Liz sees the short story, recognizes it as hers, confronts Ken about it, and Ken's like, no, print this. And he wrote his own short story about how he stole Liz's short story, which then gets printed. He's able to pass English. He play football. We win football. Rah, rah, rah.
And then the B plot is Jessica's running the Centennial Picnic, and there are some kind of last minute challenges that she ends up solving, and it goes great. And Elizabeth's being rude about it the whole time. I got a couple things, just general things.
Mm-hmm.
One is I did find it hilarious that like multiple times in the book, it makes a point to tell us from multiple different people talking about how like everyone knows that Collins's class is so easy and it's like almost impossible to fail. It's like first Jessica and Winston or whoever are like, English is so easy. How could Ken be failing? And Liz is like, guys, don't be rude. And then she thinks to herself, but it is really easy. And then later someone's like, yeah, I could understand if it was math or something, but like English, everyone's just like, how dumb are you? And it's so taken for granted that it's so easy. No, I know it's not. They're saying he's dumb. And of course, Mr. Collins goes out of his way to call him not dumb.
I just want to say, as a former high school English teacher, like I have been bad, or I had been, I don't anymore, but like I had students who definitely did not do enough work to pass or did not turn in work that demonstrated learning and mastery of skills. And I had parents in parent-teacher conferences be like, but your class is English. It's not like it's science or math or something that's hard. Can't you just pass my kid? So I just,
Rude.
for me, it feels like, let's not reinforce that.
Oh, I thought it was funny.
Yeah. That got a sharp look from Becky.
One thing about this book that does connect for me, I did identify emotionally with Ken's like procrastination and anxiety journey around writing. We see over the chapter, this is his last chance to pass English so that he can play in this football game. And like, so the stakes are pretty high in that sense. And yet he cannot force himself to do it. Like he sits down, he gets distracted. He decides he'll work on something else. Like when Suzanne calls him and says like, hey, let's go to a movie. He's like, okay. So then he has like only 2 hours to write it. And then she's like, come for dinner after. And he's like, okay. What it really, really reminded me of was, did you ever watch My So-Called Life?
Yeah.
Yeah. The episode where she's with Jordan in the boiler room instead of going to geometry review because she's failing geometry.
So hot. Yeah.
Every night I make the same vow that tomorrow I will go to geometry review. But every day, we barely talked. So when we did, it came out sounding really meaningful. There's a tiny leaf in your hair. Where?
And then like someone rings fire alarm or something, or something happens that like the test has to be postponed. And then Ryan and Sharon, who teamed up this episode, tell Angela, guess what? Teacher's doing one last geometry review after class today. So you actually have another chance before the test because now the test is postponed till tomorrow. Isn't that great? And then she's like, yeah. But then she sees Jordan and everyone goes and looks at Jordan. And then he like starts walking towards her in slow motion and it plays that song of like, how night. Remember? And they went to the concert before. Anyway, so he comes to her, holds her hand in slow motion, and then they walk together. You know they're going to the boiler room, and Sharon is like calling after her, like, Angela, like geometry review, and Ryan's like, forget it, she's already gone. That's what this book felt like. It's like you're watching them like destruct for this like bad, like toxic relationship kind of.
Okay.
What? No?
I'm trying to place the song you were singing and I can't. And I want to know what it was.
I mean, I'll send it to you later.
Oh, do you know the song?
Yeah, it's Buffalo Tom. Look it up. It's called Buffalo Tom. I want to say Late at Night. You'll find it. They probably have one song. You're going to recognize this. And I promise when you hear it, you're going to know exactly what I'm talking about. If you really did watch that show, like you're telling me you did.
Yeah, I know you don't believe me.
Picture them in the hall at the lockers. Slow motion, Jordan coming to her.
I don't know if I remember that song or not.
All right, whatever. You want to guess taglines?
Can Suzanne change Ken? And
I mean, now you're really astral projecting.
And a picnic to remember, ...
Okay, I love that.
Yeah.
I love that one. Okay, will Suzanne succeed in changing
Yeah.
Ken?
So you give me a tip last book that it's basically just the words from the cliffhanger. And
No, don't use that. Don't remember that. That's not nice for our game.
I'll try to forget.
Well, we're gonna have to make it that I read the cliffhanger and I don't ask the question because that's not good now. All right, you want to guess the last? What you said? Picnic to remember? No.
Picnic to remember ...
It is something ...
It's always something ...
There was one time it wasn't.
That's true. That's true. An unlikely match ... Or an unlikely pair ... Okay, what is it?
Madly in love. ...
No one in this book is madly in love.
Well, we'll get into it. You want to see the cover?
I'm so annoyed. I want to see the cover. I'm so annoyed at madly in love ... That is bullshit. Oh.
Mm-hmm.
Well, your aim has gotten worse, I think, with your excitement.
Or better. Or has gone better. Do you see to what I'm drawing your attention?
His shoulder has bicep?
Yeah, that's positively bulging. It's positively veiny. Okay. That's positively ripped. Look,
Trying to
look
describe
at
without
this.
using the word veiny.
Have we seen a body like this so far? I say no.
Is Bill Chase not like this?
This isn't surfing muscles, sweetie. This is not surfing muscles.
Oh, it's football muscles. I
Mhm.
do like that they've made him look like, do you remember season 4 winner of RuPaul's Drag Race, Sharon Needles? He
Yeah,
looks like
but
Sharon out of drag.
I don't remember what she looks like.
She looks like that. She's got like, she had at least short platinum blonde hair, kind of a beautiful feminine face. She looks like Molly Ringwald here, right? Suzanne?
I don't see anything by him and his muscles. Like his body is crazy. Look at his muscles.
Yeah, I'm wondering how much of this is you seeing this through like 12-year-old Becky's eyes.
Robert, we look at these covers every week and you're always Stephen's so hot and so let me think someone's hot. I think you aren't seeing close enough. Like when I tell you the definition, Robert, I don't think you can see these little shadows here.
Yeah.
Okay. He's sculpted. Like this is a body yaddy yaddy. Okay.
I
For
love
real.
your use of sculpted, of course, because it calls to mind Pygmalion and Galatea. And the fact that the original myth, Pygmalion was trying to sculpt the perfect woman and then bring that woman to life, and that woman was Galatea. And he is sculpted in the same way that Hands Off Hanlon is trying to sculpt him. There's just something, he's like very pretty.
I mean, I have to say it. It's doing the thing that it always does, which is sexist, which is can she succeed in changing him? She's
Right.
like she's the villain and he's stuck in her clutches and he's madly in love and he's struck by love and he's this basically passive person who's just this nice football boy. Everyone's making him so a victim and it's giving Bill Chase, it's giving Steven, it's giving every time that a woman supposedly gets her clutches. And I said it in Head Over Heels, I'll say it again. It takes two to tango, bitch. It takes two to tango, and he's tangoing in this book. But the title, the taglines, and absolutely the cover make it look like she's after him and he's just feels stuck or something, doesn't even want to be there. That is not the case. He is horny for her.
He's definitely horny for her. I do wonder, like, who is Lovestruck? I don't feel like either of them is really Lovestruck. And throughout the whole text, I'm always like, why does Suzanne like Ken? I don't get, like,
I think she kind of likes him because he looks good
rippling.
and he looks good. He's socially whatever, and he seems to do what she wants. Like she seems to want to sort of dominate and mold a person, and he seems to, for some time, to be willing to be molded. And they obviously have sexual chemistry. I think that's a huge part of it. And like that's the only reason he likes her. That's the only thing he likes about her. It's like he's not in love with her because they have great conversation. You know what I'm saying? Like this is not love. He's horny struck. He's horny struck.
Yeah, I guess they couldn't call the book Hornystruck.
But like that's what it should be called. You know, it's
Hornystruck.
infatuation.
Yeah, because it is often like he's like, oh, I see her, and like everything else goes out of my mind.
I have a chill up my ... spine. He's so good looking. You know what I bet? I bet he had to like do a couple years over because he looks like older, kind of like, and the way of like, you know what I mean? Like I feel like he's like probably just been around high school for a while, you know?
Sure. Yeah, in a way that where he's like over 18 so that all of your gross feelings are fine. Is that what you mean? I mean, he's got to be plenty stupid if he's failing Collins' English class.
Should we get into it?
Please.
Okay. Here's how our text begins. Elizabeth Wakefield sat by the family pool in the bright Sweet Valley, California sun, being a salty bitch because her sister was in charge of the centennial picnic instead of her. She was absolutely triggered when Jessica like had anything positive going on and has to absolutely be a Debbie Downer. So she tried to avoid Jessica and was being snide about Jessica's enthusiasm for this event.
Yeah. It's actually meaner in the text because it's Elizabeth is trying to drown out her twin sister's voice. The whole first chapter is Liz complaining about Jess talking about the centennial picnic, as if Liz didn't talk about the talent show the entire time she was planning the talent show in that book. Like every time she has any administrative task, it is literally all she does. She often delegates work to other people, but talks about it constantly. And then when Jessica tries to delegate work, she's like, well, what are you doing exactly? And it's like, well, what did you do for that fucking carnival, Liz?
Literally. And she didn't shut up about it. It was all she
Never.
talked about. And this centennial event is a way bigger deal than that carnival. Like, this is the biggest town event in 100 years, literally. That's what it is.
Literally.
So, I mean, this is a much bigger deal than her small taters. And the things that she supposedly is annoyed at Jess for is like, just kept talking about it and asking them for ideas. And I'm like, wow, she's so terrible.
Yeah, I had not really reckoned with the fact that Liz is jealous and salty and angry. I just thought she was being annoying. I didn't do the like extra level of analysis that you did. So thank you for welcoming me to the realm of analysis. I just was like, oh, she's annoyed by it. And I think it's annoying that she's annoyed. I didn't do the level of like, oh, she's annoyed because she has feelings about this.
And then they talk about maybe Jessica can get the droids, and Elizabeth says maybe she can help Jessica out a little bit. And Jessica recruits Elizabeth to do a little bit of the, I guess what we would call today is the sex work booth.
No, we'd still call it the kissing booth, I think. I don't think you'd call it the sex work booth.
Kissing for money, not sex work? What is it? What we call this then?
I'm pretty sure we just call it the kissing booth, starring Jacob Elordi, speaking of Saltburn reference number 2.
Wait, what? What's that?
You don't know about the kissing booth?
I mean, it sounds familiar. Quickly tell me what.
Kissing booth 1, 2, and 3 are 3 like high school movies about a kissing. Oh, you have to watch them. They're terrible. They're like some of my favorite like teenage rom-com-y nonsense stuff. And they star a young Jacob Elordi, and he is hot, 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 and he can act not at all.
And just how young are we talking?
Over 18, well over 18.
Great,
Yeah,
right,
yeah.
right.
Let me just fact check that quickly, but I think you're good to go.
So Jessica recruits Liz to be doing the kissing booth at the carnivals. People are gonna be paying her for a little smooch.
He is 21 in the kissing booth number 1, so rest
Right.
assured.
Liz is rude to Jess. She says raising money for the community is a wonderful thing, but I don't think it's going to win you a Nobel Prize. Elizabeth basically doesn't trust that Jessica could do anything not self-serving. It's like, but Elizabeth knew that Jessica seldom did anything for anyone other than herself. But whatever Jessica's motivations were, Elizabeth had to admit it's a good cause. I'm like, had to admit it? It's like so strange. I'm like, do the words elf mean anything to you? Like when she dressed up in the elf costume for charity on Christmas?
Well, if it isn't double trouble, Alice said and laughed, looking at the twins. Ugh, honestly, Mother, I hate it when people say that. Elizabeth eyed her sister and said, single trouble and sister might be more accurate, and laughed. I actually thought that was kind of funny.
Alice is so weird.
Yeah.
They're just telling their mom what's going on with the centennial and how Ken is doing bad in English, so he might have football, blah, blah, blah. And then Jessica had suggested that Elizabeth could tutor him, which was also very obvious. And she decides she's going to do it.
One thing that's interesting is Elizabeth is willing to help Ken. This is not so different from Jessica in the history paper. And it just feels like there have been many moments where Jessica would have benefited from twin guidance.
Mm-hmm.
And Elizabeth withholds it. And it just seems interesting that she's so willing to help Ken.
Yeah, like she was so willing to help Annie with her math or whatever it was, right? Or with
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, she's always helping other people with their schoolwork or with their whatever. And when Jessica asks, she's automatically resentful about it.
Yeah.
I mean, I do think there's a reading, and Jessica, hints at it. We have tracked a bit of a thread of sexual tension between Liz and Ken in the past, and Liz, may have some other reasons for wanting to spend some private time with Ken.
So that was what really the biggest surprise of me of this book is at the end of the book when Suzanne and Ken break up and Ken has just exchanged a big hug with Liz. I expected Ken to be like, hey, Liz, let's date. Or at least let's go to Miller's Point and see what's up. And that surprised me because I do feel like there's an energy, there's a heat betwixt them. And I was hoping to explore some of that. And there is no heat in this book for them.
I agree with you. And it's funny because we have seen that be the way things go a lot of times. It's like once someone realizes who the bad person is and dumps them, they like realize who the good person is and go with them. Like when Bill realized Jessica was being manipulative and then was like, suddenly his eyes were open to Dee Dee, or when Robin Wilson realized Bruce was mean and her eyes opened to Alan.
The dorky guy outside?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you kind of think that's going to happen, but
it doesn't.
But I do think there's something about like, there's a big thread in this book of Liz. I mean, put it this way. In the end of the last book, as we noted, she's eyeing the two of them saying they're no good together, right? Suzanne's too much of a snob and all this type of stuff, right? I think in this book, she does a lot of like positioning herself with Ken in a way of contrasting herself against Suzanne, where she's the accessible, inclusive, down-to-earth, smart girl, literary girl, intellectual girl. Yes, she writes for the Oracle. Yes, she does well in English, but her short story was such simple language, and the poem that she reads at the snobby literary event that Suzanne hosts, the whole time she and Ken are sort of winking at each other, laughing at how pretentious everything is and how overwrought and overcomplicated all the language is. And then she goes up and reads a simple poem that manages to blow everyone away. And he says to her afterwards, wow, I never knew you could express so much in so few words. And what a contrast to Suzanne and her friends, who are so alienating in their smartness. So I do think that's Elizabeth's kind of strategy here, to get Ken to see her as an option, maybe.
There's that reading. There's also the like one level up of this, like the meta of, in some ways, this is Kate William and Francine saying like, hey, I know you may think our writing is simple, and like, no, this isn't Shakespeare, but the best writing is simple.
100%. I was thinking that too. I was picturing also Amy Boesky or whoever, like at Oxford or whatever, wherever it was, and some of us go and some of us don't, and it doesn't matter where she was doing her graduate work, but thinking to herself, well, this simple stuff is really just as smart as the complicated stuff.
Yeah, so much depends on a red wheelbarrow. That's enough. We don't need to go with everything else. Not everything is a sonnet, as Dr. Rebecca Pardo screams into the abyss. So we then cut to Ken reflecting on like, how did I get into such a bad place? How did my grades slip so far? And there's this weird thing where Ken went to a meeting with Coach, and it's Coach, Ken, Collins, the English teacher.
Coach Schultz, obviously.
Yeah, sorry, Coach Schultz, whom we last heard of pretending to quit, but not quitting just to get more money. Ken, who's obviously the main character. Collins, who is the English teacher. And then Bruce is in there as well.
Totally inappropriate.
Hello,
Crazy.
FERPA. Like, let's protect some educational privacy for this young person. Like, Bruce should absolutely not know that Ken is failing English. This is truly ridiculous. And Ken kind of justifies it and says, like, well, Bruce is a student president of the Centennial Committee, and so it makes sense that Bruce would be involved in this discussion about my grades because it's about whether I can play football at the Centennial football game. No, Ken.
Basically, they're trying to say to Collins, oh, Collins, can you just let him pass so that you can play this game? And Collins is like, that wouldn't be right. I don't do favoritism, except in Perfect Summer when I do favoritism to Liz, and except when I made her be in charge of the talent show and the carnival committee, and she gets me in charge for everything, even though she actually shouldn't be. So he says, no, you have to write this short story, and that's going to be your last chance. And he's like, okay. And then he leaves the meeting feeling all this pressure. And he's like, well, okay, at least Elizabeth's going to give me some tips. And then we have his first encounter that we see with Suzanne.
Well, hello, handsome. Are you in a hurry? Father's picking me up in a few minutes. Can you wait? Sure. Ken smiled. He was always amazed at how poised Suzanne was. Ken thought a lot of the kids at Sweet Valley held that against her. They thought she was a snob. But Ken knew differently. He knew how warm and wonderful he felt when he was with her. Just seeing her washed all thoughts and worries about the English assignment right out of his head. When he was with Suzanne, nothing else seemed to matter. How'd you do on your French quiz? He asked. Oh, it was a breeze. The hardest part was the dictation. It's so difficult for me to understand Miss Dalton's accent sometimes. She has this northern French accent, and it sounds like ducks squawking. I was hoping practice would be over soon. I know this is short notice, but I was wondering if you'd like to come by for dinner tonight. It won't be any big deal, just my parents and my brother. but I thought it might be fun. You've never really met them. Now, if you've got something else planned, no, I'd love to come. Good, I'm so glad. Just then, a Rolls Royce drove into the parking lot. Suzanne turned away from Ken. Whoops, there's my ride. Nice car, Ken said as he looked over the sleek silver shadow. What does your dad drive when he wants to impress people? Oh, he takes the newer Rolls. This is our second car. Suzanne winked at Ken and kissed him quickly. See you tonight, 7:30. Ken's thoughts turned gloomy again as he walked to the white Toyota his parents had helped him buy the summer before.
We learn here that Ken hasn't told Suzanne about his English grade and the fact that he has to work on this short paper. So he's like hiding that from her. Also, just on the infatuation piece, when he first sees her, she was standing next to him looking just wonderful in a short skirt and a loose-fitting silk pullover that accentuated her willowy figure. She smiled at him. Her hazel eyes seemed to look right through him. A chill raced up Ken's spine. No matter how many times he looked at Suzanne, she still gave him that chill. There's something in the tension between them that he likes because he feels uncomfortable.
It's giving a little bit of Billy Joel's Uptown Girl. There is that tension. There is that disparity. There is that idea that, like, if someone as rich and smart as her wants me, that must mean something good about me. And he doesn't. It's interesting. At no point do either of them really talk about liking anything about each other more than the way they look.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so, I mean, their conversation and the narration around their conversation is so focused on his response when he sees her. Which, as you said, like, he's hornystruck, not lovestruck.
He's reflecting on how, well, it's okay that he pretends to like Mozart because you want to like stuff that your girlfriend likes, but he also knew that she wouldn't be open to trying his music. She's not going to come with him to beach disco or rock concert. And in theory, that's concerning. But then the way that gets resolved and the way the chapter ends is, then Ken pictured Suzanne as he last saw her, a broad smile lighting her face as she greeted him on the front steps of Sweet Valley High. As long as he could be with Suzanne, he would gladly give up almost anything. She was the most important thing that had ever happened in his life. So weird. I wonder if, and the thing about her kind of greeting him on the front steps shows the public nature of it, I think, too. Like, there's something about the, not showmance, but there's something about the, like, them being a couple and what that means for status. Like, we know that it's such a big deal to have a boyfriend or girlfriend and stuff like this for a lot of people. And I just wonder, does he think that's going to give him some different kind of...
It is. I mean, they do such a conspicuous job of their difference in class. He's getting into a white Toyota that his parents helped him buy. There's this, is she joking about this being their second car and they have a newer Rolls? Because she does wink, but she doesn't really strike me as a joker. So I'm not sure that I don't know.
How I interpreted it was like, she was serious in the fact that they actually do have another Rolls, but she's winking because she knows he was joking.
Yeah, I think that makes sense to me.
It's like, yeah, I am that rich, but we're cool still, you know?
And I love that.
Ken comes over to the Wakefield to get Elizabeth's help on his short story assignment. Ken tells Liz that he's worried that he's not a good writer, and Elizabeth says, but I remember we were in class together some other time and you had a good report on Edgar Allan Poe, so I think you are a good writer. And he's like, yeah, but that's nonfiction. How do I just come up with a short story out of nowhere? And she suggests that he reads other short stories to get inspiration. And he says he tried that and it didn't help. He's like, I don't know how to put it together. How do you actually construct it? And then Elizabeth is struck. And, you know, we get the usual spiel about how her writing is so private to her and her short stories, and she would never turn this over to just anyone. And it's so important because of her secret dream and blah, 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 blah. But she has this folder that apparently contains a short story that she wrote, but also the pre-work, including outline and notes. And she suggests to him that if he were to review all of these notes, he would understand better the process of constructing the story from scratch. And we learned that it's a story about a kid who has just moved to Sweet Valley. Ken says, that's perfect. And she said, don't show anyone. He says, I won't. And then he leaves. And Robert, I know you're absolutely raring to go on this. So
my 6-word summary focused on the ways that Elizabeth's role as a bad teacher kind of sets into motion the central problems of this text. And I believe that it does. I think Collins also has a dereliction of duty here as well. I think he also is not being a good teacher. It feels so clear to me that what Kent is asking for here is, could you sit down with me and talk me through this with my ideas so that I can organize them into a short story? And Elizabeth wants to be a good person and wants to help, but she doesn't actually want to do the work of helping. What she should have done is said, okay, great, let's sit down. What were you thinking you're going to write about? Like, let's build an outline together. This is how we do, like giving actual instruction. And instead, what she does is she says, here is my work. You want to read an example short story, something exemplary? Well, Lord knows what I write is exemplary. And it has all of the work, so you can just kind of follow along. And I don't want to victim blame here. I mean, I think obviously Todd has agency. Todd turned in Elizabeth's short story. That makes Todd the one who cheated.
I'm sorry.
Oh, God. Did I just have a stroke? Do I want Todd back?
You miss him.
That's okay. It's okay to miss someone, Robert. It's okay to grieve.
Listen, grief lasts more than one book, as we've learned.
As we've learned.
We'll be saying goodbye for years to come to Turd.
I look forward to it. Pardo is making an exaggerated zipping my lips motion. So Liz did not want to help Ken. She wanted to have helped Ken, but she did not want to help Ken. So she doesn't. What she does instead is she sets him up where his only way forward is cheating. Because she doesn't give him structure. She doesn't give him advice. She doesn't give him tips. She just says, here's this thing I wrote that no one else knew about. Here is this wallet of money. Oh, you need hundreds of dollars? Like, I'll just give you this wallet and I don't know how much money's in it and like make sure I get it back at some like.
Yeah, it's very, very frustrating to read because it's so obvious that like that wouldn't be the first place to start, right? Like you obviously start by like, why are you even there in person to begin with? Like you're there in person to talk and like to talk about how you can, what might be an idea and then how you might develop that idea. He's there, like spend 15 minutes, help him make an outline or help him find a place to start or help him brainstorm or whatever. Like it's like, give a person a fish or teach a person to fish,
Exactly.
She gave a person a fish with an outline essentially. But I think, then the other reading really is like, is it that she's oblivious or was she trying to have an accidental way to get that paper to Mr. Collins, who she probably suspected from the beginning was going to put it in the Oracle. I'm not saying she went that far, but she knew it was going to make its way to Mr. Collins. And she probably knew that Mr. Collins is probably smart enough to actually identify a delta between Elizabeth, the best writer in the Valley, and Ken, who, not to be rude, but actually is failing English, one of the famously most easiest classes. And actually, I think Mr. Collins could probably figure that out without having to put it in a newspaper. So that would have been a way for Elizabeth to impress Ken with her, yes, I'm smart, but you can be simple. And that's how I'm different from Suzanne. And we could actually be a match. Plus, it gets to Collins and gets her a little gold star, too.
But just to be clear, Collins was not able to identify that delta at all. He was just like, wow, that Ken really can write.
Yeah, but he should have, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, in the real world, he would have accused Ken of cheating. He wouldn't have been like, that's amazing.
Well, the biggest thing in this whole book that drives me crazy, since we're talking about this shenanigans with the paper plagiarism, this was my scrolling for this book. It's hard. I get so activated. So Ken submits Liz's paper with his name on it to Collins, right? Collins thinks to himself, wow, not only is this a fantastic paper, I'm so happy of Ken, it should go in the Oracle because guess what? The Oracle's working on a special edition for the Centennial. And since the subject of this story is about someone who came new to Sweet Valley, it would actually be appropriate subject matter for that special edition of the Oracle. Why don't I go ahead and give this to the Oracle editors and Penny and all our friends at the Oracle office, and they're going to put it in the edition. Seems straightforward to me. Doesn't want to think about getting consent or permission from the author, which in his mind apparently is Ken. So he gives it to the people at the Oracle, and Penny's like, look at this great essay that Collins gave us. And it's like, okay, but don't we need Ken's permission for this? And when Elizabeth looks at it and she's like, oh shit, this is my paper, but she doesn't want to tell them. She's like, then she goes and tells Ken, she's like, well, there's nothing we can do unless you fess up and tell the truth. And I'm like, he didn't have to, not that he shouldn't have, but they're tying these two things together that don't have to be. Elizabeth has obviously realized he plagiarized it for his own course. But on top of that, having it published in the paper under his name is obviously a much bigger consequence. And like, they're both trying to prevent that. But the thing that's crazy is that the obvious way to prevent that is for Ken to tell Collins, I don't give you permission. I'm not comfortable with my work being published in this newspaper, period. And that's a completely has nothing to do with the plagiarism. These don't have to be solved in the same sentence, in other words. And like, they're both framing it as like, the only way we can stop this being published is for you to tell him that you plagiarized, which again, I'm not saying the problem is like, he shouldn't have come clean, like he should come clean, but like, no one ever considers the fact that they need his permission to publish this. It's ridiculous.
And then when Ken tries to retract, tries to not give consent, Liz is like, well, but then what will we print? We'll have these blank pages. We can't do that. And it's like, what?
How about this? How about print the 75 people auditioning for this week's this or that, like you did with the cheerleader tryouts?
It's a very good joke.
Okay, I think then we get Ken at dinner at Suzanne's. We get the usual kind of discomfort around butlers. This time the butler's name is Mason.
Yeah, Mason.
It kind of reminded me of Saltburn, because just that when Jacob Elordi's like, oh, that's just our butler. Like, one new guy's like, oh, butler's weird. And Jacob Elordi's like, no, that's just him. Ha ha ha. Like, that's a thing that shows in movies and I guess books love to do, is like, the rich person is so comfortable with the creepy butler, but their poor friend who comes in is scared of the creepy butler. And they're like, oh, that's just this one. Like, you'll get used to that. That's like a very common trope, I feel.
Wow. Just wow.
Just leave your bag there. Someone will get it for you.
Ollie! Thank God you're here. Duncan, I'll show him to his room, don't worry. Oliver, try not to be too terrified of Duncan. Duncan, stop being so frightening in front of my friends.
Well, I'll try.
Come on, mate. Come on.
He's terrified.
Oh, he's alright. He's just... Oh. Okay.
Basically, it's the usual thing you're going to expect. The normal people are uncomfortable because these people are pretentious fools. And they do nothing to help him feel more comfortable, and in fact, make him feel more alienated by like going around the table quoting Shakespeare all day at him. But I thought that the kind of variation on the utensil play and the utensil anxiety that we saw with Roger was fascinating, because I died at this, because what happens is, like, first of all, I have a note that says, do rich people only eat cold creamy soup? Because
yes, we do. Yes, we do.
I think we were first talking about this in Perfect Summer, right? When at Courtney, at her house in the Beverly Hills, remember they had that cold tomato soup?
Mm-hmm.
And now they're having the cold creamy soup at the Hanlons. And I wonder, is this rich people thing at the time? I guess cold creamy soup.
Vichyssoise, etc.
About the utensils, like, it's funny because at the beginning, it's like Ken was relieved because he took the farthest spoon and then he saw everyone else do that. And he's like relieved that his mom showed him that. And you're like, oh, okay, he's actually going to be comfortable with the utensils. But then he has a totally different utensil anxiety moment that is fascinating.
Which one's that?
We're always interested in different stuff. It's so funny. I always think we're going to like be obsessed with the same.
Oh, I did highlight this other utensil anxiety.
It was just different. Like, I mean, I kind of feel like we have to really talk about it. Okay. There was a lull in the conversation. Ken noticed for the first time that everyone was using their knife and fork in a different way from him. Rather than cutting their food and then switching the fork from one hand to the other, the Hanlons cut their food and then piled it onto the back of the fork without changing hands. Ken thought it looked very sophisticated and tried it once, but he couldn't get the trout to stay on the fork. He made a mental note to practice at home. Do you understand what this means about the changing hands?
Mm-hmm.
Can you show me? Because I don't.
Well, I wish you would ask me to prepare. I would have brought a fork and knife upstairs. So like, you're cutting with your fork and your knife, but if I do this, my knife is in my right hand and my fork is in my left hand.
Yeah, I'm doing the same.
But I'm right-handed, and so what I do is I drop the knife past the fork, and now I'm eating with my right hand. What?
Wait, what?
You don't do that?
I'm left-handed, first of all.
I bet I knew that. I mean, we've been friends forever. That doesn't.
No, but now I'm really not gonna. So is this what all right-handed people do? They gotta switch hands every time you take a bite? That's crazy. I'm so sad for you. Wait, why don't you just keep your fork on the other side then?
Well, because I definitely can't cut like this. That would never happen. I can't cut with my left hand.
So what this actually tells us is that lefties can do some stuff with our right hand, because at least we could use a goddamn knife, whereas righties can't use their left hand for anything, and that's called righty privilege. That's righty privilege. Wow. Sorry, go ahead.
Wait, is it righty privilege or is it like lefty accomplishment? Shouldn't you just be proud of the fact that you're a left-handed luminary?
Had to. You never had to, because everything's always for you. The desk is on the proper side. You don't know what it's like that every day of my life, on this side of my palm, I have blue. I have to split my journal into 2 sections so that I don't get too much ink on my hand, and I have to go from right to left. All right. So I don't understand this fork. So can you explain to me, in your experience, is this a sophistication
Yeah,
thing?
I think
What
it
is
is.
this?
It's like, I believe it's like the European way of doing it.
Is to put it on the back?
I think so.
I just wish we had. We're gonna have to find a YouTube video or something. All right.
The other kind of awkward thing, I just really, really liked, Ken is meeting Mr. Hanlon and he says, Suzanne tells me you're into computers, which is such a funny thing. And then Mr. Hanlon goes, yes, I guess you could put it that way. We have a consultant firm that deals with computer layout for major operations. And then Ken's like, oh, duh, you don't say into computers. What a dumb thing to say. It's just like very funny.
That's kind of cute because it's like that's what you would say to a person his own age who's interested in something, because you're into it. Yeah.
Ken has been asked not to talk about football at the table. And we see why pretty early, because Mr. Hanlon says all sorts of anti-football things. Like, it never ceases to amaze me how schools always have to seem plenty of time for things like football and baseball, but real education, forget it. It's as if they think their only purpose is to produce more stupid athletes.
Yeah, so rude. I think this is the first time we really see Suzanne sucks, like, or doing something sucky, where like the fact that she specifically says, I don't think you should mention football at the dinner table, Dad doesn't think too much of it, when that's Ken's like thing he loves most, is a real bummer.
Yeah, I think this is not the first time we've seen her be this way, but I agree this is a real hard thing
What
to
was the
say.
first time?
The whole like, oh, Ken really likes most, like all of the, just the ways that she's been, like everything we've said, heard her say has all been very like, you're not good enough for me.
Well, I actually disagree. I think some of the things that she says is a result of him being dishonest about his true interests. So when she gives him a Mozart tape and he keeps playing it, pretends to like it, like, she isn't going to know that that's not true. Whereas with the football thing, she's actively demeaning things about him. So I think in some cases it may be a bit more ambiguous.
I hear that. I think you're more generous to Suzanne. I think probably because you're more like her. And since I'm more like Ken, that's probably why I'm being more sensitive to Ken.
And the ways in which I'm more like her is what?
Arrestingly gorgeous, taste for the finer things in life.
And you're like Ken how? Bad at English?
Yeah, like Ken, bad at English, incredibly muscular. Try to describe me without using the word veiny. I dare you.
All right, so I think that we move to the end of the dinner, and Ken and Suzanne leave the house. You know, Ken's feeling frustrated about this football shade. When dinner was over and he had thanked the Hanlons, Ken walked to his car with Suzanne. He had to talk to her about his feelings about football. He had to make her understand. His mind was a jumble of thoughts, and he walked next to her in the driveway in a kind of moody silence. Just the moody silence felt realistic to me, because if you are sort of like frustrated or angry, but to express that to the person, like, also like that's also going to involve some uncomfortable accountability on his part for letting it go this far, kind of thing, right? Of like not being more assertive and honest before. And I feel like that's part of what he's doing in this book, is sort of the thing we always make fun of Liz for saying that she is, which is like, oh, I've been too deep, I can't go back. It's not that you can't go back, but it does require maybe some discomfort, like for him to, and so the farther it goes, he's more, I guess, scared of finally saying his feelings or whatever.
The other thing that I like is that he assumes best intentions from Suzanne, even though she absolutely doesn't deserve it. So it's things like he says, like, I'm gonna help her understand. I'm gonna make her understand things about football. I'll explain it to her, as if it's like, oh, she just needs someone to explain it to her. She's not like a stuck-up, cold, mean, haughty, awful person. She just needs someone to explain it to her.
Yeah, and I guess my generous reading to Suzanne of that sentence would, and I'm not being obnoxious, I'm being for real, which
Okay.
I guess it could be both. Like the way I would interpret that is like, he says he has to make her understand, which is giving himself the benefit of the doubt as if he's already tried to say it. It's like, why am I saying it? She's not getting it. I have to make her understand. But it's like, you haven't even told her. Again, I'm being too generous to her, I think. But like, I feel that she does some things in this book that are really, really gross, and that we see she's really gross in many ways. But
Good.
I just think he needs a bit of accountability in this book. It doesn't get him.
I can hear both things.
So she says, what Daddy said at the table upset you, didn't it? He says, yeah, sports isn't just a bunch of dumb guys bashing one another's brains out. Your father doesn't understand. And then she kisses him and says, it's okay, you did fine. It isn't important. So reinforcing that the thing that matters is if he satisfied them, not if he's comfortable, right?
Right.
Which is bad. And he still had the feeling she didn't understand, but it began not to matter to him. It was like that when they were alone. He took her in his arms and returned a kiss. He bumps into Bruce and Regina and he sees them jogging and kind of having some banter and teasing each other, and Regina's back and he marvels now she can hear and everything else. Then what he takes away from that is, well, you know, everyone also thought that those two were so different that they couldn't be together. And so he's kind of inspired by their, what seems like a happy ending. ... And and he thinks to himself, he goes, but Ken's encounter with Bruce and Regina had shown him that different kinds of people could be in love with each other, and it doesn't matter what other people think. We'll show them that this thing between Suzanne and me is real. And I wrote, sadly, he and Suzanne aren't like them because they are both rich. LOL.
Yeah.
Which is why it doesn't actually work. Because
we can overcome all sorts of
actually
things.
Different.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and because the ways that Bruce and Regina are different, like Bruce is a dick, and so not being a dick is like a really, like, it's a kind of, we can take a step back and just be like, yeah, no, it's net positive for Bruce to not be a dick anymore. Whereas like Ken's, their differences, I don't know that there's necessarily a negative, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Chapter 5, we get Ken just procrastinating.
So relatable.
At,
OMG.
Yep. The typewriter noise is ruining his concentration. He gets up and turns it. He's pacing. Maybe I should do my math homework first. He closes his eyes and fantasizes about football.
We've all been there.
And then Suzanne calls him and says, do you want to come with me and my friends to go see a film tomorrow night?
And he doesn't want to go.
No, it's The Seventh Seal, a Bergman film. And he actually makes a little funny when he's embarrassed here. I thought, good for him on his feet. He says he hasn't seen it, and she says, I can't believe it. And he says, well, I guess I was busy with something else when it came out. Did it come out last summer? And she quietly, so disappointed, says, I think it came out in 1957. And he goes, well, that explains it. I was real busy in 1957. I don't think I saw a single movie the whole year. And she laughs.
That's a really good joke to me.
It was great, especially when you've just been embarrassed. So he looks back and forth between the typewriter and the phone, and he says, fine, I'll come to your movie. And he falls asleep. He wakes up. He sneaks into English class late, gets a dirty look from Collins. Collins says, hope you're working on the paper. He's like, yes, sir. Yep, paper's going great. Then he's staring at the typewriter more.
And then he reminisces on what happened earlier in the night. And he's thinking about, because this was the night that they went to dinner and a movie, and he reflects on the movie. He did not have a good time.
No, there were some uncomfortable moments.
I mean, in his defense, Seventh Seal is in Swedish. There were subtitles, but the subtitles were white and they were printed over a white part of the screen. So most of the time he couldn't read it. That is an accessibility fail.
Total.
The movie makes very little sense. In Ken's defense, I went to Wikipedia to read a summary of the Seventh Seal to see like, oh, is there something rich here happening? I couldn't understand the Wikipedia summary of the movie.
Girl, same. I said, what? Death playing chess? I said, who?
Yeah, I said, are there twins?
Well, we didn't understand it, but Suzanne and her friend, all her smart friends apparently do. Ken confuses Ingrid Bergman and Ingmar Bergman, which I don't blame him. I barely could understand the difference.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Even
they act like he's so stupid. It's like
on Drag Race when Aja mispronounces France Jolie's name and she says Frances Jolie, and they're like, "What? What do you mean? What? How could you?" It's like, guys, they have the same last name and a first name that is not very popular in 1985 in Sweet Valley. So yeah, I'm sorry if I confuse the two of them. I don't know anything about either of them.
I was trying to go for like a share, like meets like Frances Jolie, like Frances who? Frances Jolie.
You mean France Jolie?
Is that how you say it? France Jolie. Oh, I just learned that right now.
Afterwards, he's like, maybe I am a dumb jock. And what she had said to him was, don't be silly, you're not dumb. It's just that your experience has been limited, all a matter of exposure. My friends aren't smarter than you. They've just seen more truly great films. And yeah, that's a bunch of bullshit. And we can all, I think, agree on that. So
Yeah.
we're on the same page there.
It feels like it's the kind of thing that her parents said to her to be like, never judge someone who hasn't had the advantages you've had. Like the beginning of Great Gatsby or like some kind of noblesse oblige.
Oh, and then it's like he was just about to tell her the truth that he doesn't like any of the shit that she likes. But then she kissed him.
That kiss laid to rest whatever uneasiness he felt.
Now he's home and he's looking at his blank pages in Elizabeth's paper, and if only it had his name on it. If only it had his name instead of hers, and then a plot begins to form.
And he's not even smart enough to retype the whole thing. He literally just retypes the title page in a different font.
What?
So Liz has given him this short story that is like started from a pre-outline, and it's an outline, and it's a draft, and it's all of these. And she also gives him like a clean final copy that has no writing on it at all, which kind of surprised me because it's like, this hasn't been published, Liz. Wouldn't you like, you don't have any marks? Like, you know what I mean? It's like to write is to revise, you know?
Not when you're her. She's such a self-conscious writer that she would make sure that I could totally see that being an anal retentive thing she would do, of like having a super clean final copy to just stare at and jerk off to at night.
That actually does make a ton of sense to me.
Really.
But this also makes me doubt Collins's brain, because someone who's been failing your class turns in the most amazing short story you've ever seen, and the title page and all of the other pages aren't in the same font, and that doesn't make you go, huh.
Maybe we could just assume that they have the same typewriters. There was only one font.
No. It explicitly says they're different fonts.
Oh. Maybe he took it home and he and Dalton is smoking a cigarette in bed, and he's looking at this paper, and they're both laughing about how Ken could have never written this. And she's like, you know what though? Ken, let it go this time,
I bet what she was like is like, he's always struck me as mature beyond his years. And Colin's like, what? And she's like, I just mean like in French class and sometimes after French class. He just seems older than his years.
And then Liz sees Ken. She's like, so, are you happy with your story? And he's like, my what? And she's like, your story. Remember? The short story you're going to write. Because you're not taking mine. You're going to write a completely new story. And it's going to be yours and yours alone that you wrote from scratch. He's like, yeah, my story. It's great. I can't wait for you to read it. And she's like, great, can I have mine back? It's my only copy. He's like, I think I forgot it at the cleaners. Bye. I'll give it to you later. She's so annoying.
What's shocking for me is how well you capture. When I read along, that's how I hear Liz's voice in my head. And so the fact that you were able to just like pull that out of my brain and put it into the microphone is really something extraordinary. There's some needless Winston Egbert hate where Jess is checking in to make sure that Ken can still man the kissing booth, and he can. And she's like, great, because if you fell through, we'd have to get someone like Winston Egbert to be in the kissing booth, and we'd end up making about $2. And it's like, there's no need for that. He's just collateral damage in your stress about this picnic. Don't come for Winston. He eats a lot of pizza.
Like, is she wrong? But exactly. It's like, the reason why you'd only make $2 if Winston's in the booth isn't to make fun of like that he's ugly or something like that. It's because like I wouldn't trust him to not put a little snake in my face or a spider on my hair or do some kind of prank on me or throw a pizza on my head, like put a pail of water in throw a milk up my nose. Like it's not gonna be straightforward.
If that's the story you need to tell yourself, fine.
Okay, blah blah blah. Chapter 9.
Literary evening.
This is funny. Elizabeth is such a hater. Like literally, Suzanne initially called her and was like, hey, and again, I feel like I don't want to say justice for Suzanne, but just like people are rude to her when she sometimes is just doing nothing. Like the first time she called Liz, she was like, hey, I want to do this literary event and people could read poetry or do different stuff. Like, are you interested? And Liz is thinking to herself, like, oh, I don't think that's the kind of thing people will be interested. Like, doesn't really sound good. It sounds kind of stupid, but I guess she'll force me into it. And like, she shows up, she's like, what's this dumb bullshit? Like, she's just such a hater, It's a lot of sort of, you could picture what it is. People in black turtlenecks snapping. So we have Joni Shreves dressed in black reading a poem about the ghost of a woman named Daphne who had been murdered by her husband.
We've all been there.
Daphne sighed as the world A bright red apple, split at the center, revealing a core that rained appleseed tears on the parched soil of her dreams. And yeah, I think this is where we're picturing Kate William having a little giggle.
I had a little giggle myself.
Mhm.
Have you ever seen So I Married an Axe Murderer?
Yeah, but I don't remember it.
There's this whole, like, one of the recurring things is that Mike Myers is a spoken word poet and he's terrible. And he's like, woman, whoa, man. And it's just like so bad good. And this was very much that as well.
Woman! Whoa, man! Whoa, man!
So Liz and Ken are absolutely winking at each other, telling each other with their eyes, wow, we're the only normals here. Elizabeth refocused on Joni as the girl finished her poem. A life, her life, the blood, the warmth, like a baby with a bottle, the sun, the sun. And Elizabeth is laughing, and then she gets up to read her poem, and it's about her quote unquote beautiful friendship with her mother, and we can all just roll our eyes on that one.
Yeah. This is like
and everyone
desperate, lonely girl writes poem about how she wishes her mom loved her.
Since we've started the series, I can think of a few different actual intertextual pieces of Elizabeth's writing that we've been exposed to. One is Eyes and Ears. One is the shitty column about the new computer record keeping. The other is her letters to Enid. The amount we get everyone talking about how amazing her writing is, and like the way everyone reacts to it and like freaks out. Like, remember when she did that in Love Letters, when she did that play, and it was like, oh my God, it was like a hushed silence after she read it. And it's the same thing with this. It's like Liz gets up and she reads her thing, and her writing is so simple, but the room's especially quiet because of how powerful the imagery is. And it's just like, well, let's see. Where is it? We heard Joni's. Show me 2 lines of Elizabeth's poem if it's so damn good.
The other writing we saw was when she was writing about the droids, and that was also bad and unremarkable. And I do find it really interesting. I mean, I think that's one of the like common problems with books about writing or music is like whenever you talk about how amazing a poem is or how amazing, like they can't write a poem that's good.
Yeah, I'm just saying it's pretty convenient for her. You know?
Yes.
Like
the absence speaks volumes.
Let's see the goods here. And then we get to the shenanigans of Collins wants to publish the story. It's so stupid.
It's so dumb. And we've covered it, right? Like there's not really.
Yeah. Jessica is having some more minor crises with the picnic. The poster got the date wrong. And Elizabeth introduces her to this thing called whiteout. And Jessica learns about whiteout. Then we keep it going. Penny Ayala rushes into the Oracle, says, stop the presses. Liz, I've got the most fantastic feature for the centennial issue. And turns out Ken Matthews wrote a great story. And Liz is like, don't we have to talk to him first? And Penny's like, yeah, but he'll probably say yes. So first just get it in the paper and then we'll make sure. And Elizabeth looked at it and she's like, well, wait a minute. This looks gosh darn familiar. Then rumors start flying around the school and everyone learns that Ken apparently wrote this amazing story that's going to be published. And Suzanne runs to Ken and gives him a big kiss and tells him, I knew you could be smart. Now you could maybe even go to Yale. And he gets more and more annoyed with her. And Elizabeth confronts Ken and he's like, oh no, I have to stop this before it gets further. Now he's in his like, I'm ready to do the thing stage, or he's like now going to be on a mission to like solve this because now it got too far. He goes home, gets into his flow state, and soon Ken found himself sitting at his desk, staring at a story, one that said just what he wanted to say. It was about 5 pages long and contained lots of typing errors and misspellings, but it was his. It was his. Again, telling us that Collins probably could have told the difference, because if he's seen any assignments from Ken and he typically has misspellings and errors, well, then we're probably going to notice that. So.
Or are you thinking what I'm thinking, that maybe Liz had misspellings and errors and she's not as good a writer as everyone thinks she is? No, that's not it. It's just that Collins can't even read, probably.
And then Ken shows up to Liz and they have their annoying moment where he's like, take the story out, take the story out. And she's like, but Ken, how could we change the layout at the last minute? There's got to be a story in there. And he's like, well, guess what? I have one for you to replace it with. And she's like, what's this? And he's like, here it is. It's something I wrote called Offsides by Ken Matthews about a dumb little boy who steals a paper and then decides to admit it to the school so he can play in the big game, or maybe not.
Listeners, if you're not reading these books along with us, that is exactly what it is. Like, I know you think like, oh, Pardo is so creative and so hilarious that she's kind of weaving her own signature style through this. No, that is literally it. That is the big reveal, is this terrible short story. And he even says like, maybe I'll get to play and maybe I won't get to play, but at least I'll set it right.
And then everyone knows. Everyone sees the Oracle and it's all the chatter at lunch. And everyone's like, well, this is a short story, but it sounds like it's probably about Ken.
It's like this really interesting thing. It's like almost like a reverse James Frey situation where like they're really doing interesting work about the like
auto fiction and memoir, of course.
Don't say of course. Oh.
Tie on our bridges, are we? Was that not the right expression? You want to correct me with that?
Vis-a-vis.
You got that so wrong.
Miss High on her horse knows all about vis-a-vis. Well, if you were a better teacher, maybe I know about vis-a-vis too. I asked you how to use it, right? And you didn't teach me.
No, what it means is in relation to. That's what it actually means. In relation to. Which is why the way you said it was wrong. Because you said, whatever. Okay.
Oh, I do see why I said it was wrong. I said like she's developed more empathy vis-a-vis her parents' divorce.
You meant like as an outcome of.
I meant by means of, which is actually what you said it meant the first time, but you changed your kind of definition.
It's so then something I think a little strange happens that I think can give us a little clue to our friend Liz, which is Ken's by all accounts doing the right thing. He's about to close this one up. He printed it in the paper. He's about to go tell his whole story to Chrome Dome. And Liz intercepts and she's like, Ken, how about I lie for you? And like they'll trust me. And he's like, no, Liz, I'm about to actually go ahead, come clean, and I'm cool with it if they don't. And it's like,
This is just like the fake boyfriend when she's ready to tell the truth. And then she's like, well, actually, I got you a fake boyfriend to replace it, so you don't have to tell the truth. Caroline.
Precisely. It's like at the moment where the person has finally gotten the courage to do the brave thing, she tries to stop them. She actually sabotages people. It's like, they're always telling us that Liz is trying to help everyone. She's trying to destroy every person. Remember when you so astutely pointed out that with Dee Dee, that at the end Liz is like, I never thought Dee Dee could do it. And we were both like, what? Like, then why did you force her to? Right. So Ken goes and confesses everything. And it turns out okay, because they're like, well, we're going to let you pass because it came clean. And you wrote a good paper in the end, but, next time try to,
not cheat.
And by the way, you actually have some talent as a writer, by the way.
This is all just so confusing because I really don't know where I land on this, because my first thought is like, this is truly ridiculous. Like he cannot pass. He failed. He cheated. He did all this stuff. But then I'm like, well, if what we're trying to do is see, has he mastered the skills he needs in order to pass this class? He has mastered the skills he needs, so maybe he should pass.
In Talmud,
of course,
there's a concept called migo, and it means like, if someone had a scenario that you could demonstrate that they could have had the opportunity to lie and benefit from it, but they didn't, then in the next scenario, if you're trying to establish whether they're lying or not, that goes to their credit. So someone has amigo, it means sort of like a benefit, not benefit of doubt, but it's like benefit that you sort of gain over having demonstrably not lied in the past when it would have been convenient to do so, kind of thing.
Okay.
So I'm not saying he has amigo, but like he didn't have to go ahead and write that essay. He's still going to get probably a bad grade, right?
Yeah.
So I don't really care. People make mistakes. He cheated. He admitted it like a day later. Like I'm fine with it.
Okay. I think I can learn to be fine with it too.
You know what?
I don't want punitive justice, so
that's
yeah.
What I was gonna say. Like, I'm not sort of punitive, and you kind of are more like punitive, kind of like teacher vibes, and I'm more just like, oh my God, give the kids an actual break for once instead of making them like sit on a trash can with like a rotten hot dog on their head and like write on the chalkboard like I'm a little dirty pig and worm on the floor, like whatever kind of things you guys do. Then we get the final Jess panic before the picnic, the final thing that makes her freak out. And she runs into Liz's room and she's like, do you have any cash? I gotta get out of town. I need an airplane ticket.
I love her.
She's like, I have to go change my identity and do a Mrs. Daldan because I forgot to confirm the catering and now there's gonna be no food. The Sweet Valley Centennial Student Picnic is gonna go down in history as the biggest disaster since the sinking of the Titanic. And basically what she's worried about is that all these people who have paid are going to want their money back because they aren't getting anything to eat.
Which seems reasonable. It seems like a reasonable fear.
Yeah, of course. And Jessica's like, I guess I'm going to have to cook something. I'm going to be the caterer. And Elizabeth feels dread because of the famous cold seafood salad when Jessica once gave her family food poisoning that no one can shut up about, even though she has redeemed herself and beyond. Never forget the raspberry tort. Never forget the chicken cordon bleu. Never forget the gorgeous roast chicken she made for the family at home. This needs to be never discussed again.
Yeah. Put this to bed, assholes. We've got some sport writing. They play football.
Ken wins.
It's great. It's good writing. The writing sparkles. We don't need to recap it.
Basically what happens, I don't know if we said this, but before the game, after the newspaper had come out, where he told the story of how he plagiarized the first story that I guess no one ended up seeing, Suzanne was like very rude about it. It was like, you suck now. But then he goes and wins the football game and everyone's rallying around him. And she then comes and apologizes and she's like, can you forgive me? And he says, of course. And we think, are they going to be actually now being together still? But then she's rude again. And she's like, hey, well, you can come to some more of my shit now. And he's like, but I'm going to the Centennial picnic. And she's like, what? No, all that stuff is behind you. You don't want to go to that picnic. And then
it is time for me to grow up, to start making decisions on my own, like a mature person. So my first mature decision is to go to the picnic. You see, Suzanne, history lectures bore me. Art films bore me. Your friends bore me. And I guess, if you want to know the truth, you bore me too. So I hope you have a wonderful time with all your friends, Suzanne. I really do. As for me, I wouldn't miss this picnic if Shakespeare, Mark Andrews, Ingrid and Ingmar were all going to be at your house in person. See you around. I loved this. Great energy.
I didn't love, at the end he leans over and kisses her on the cheek after he's just said, he is sort of laying it on her. Again, deserved. But to kiss her on the cheek feels a little bit condescending in a way that I would have wished that part wouldn't have been in there. He didn't need to do that. That's sort of takes the hostility up a bit.
I mean, I don't know if it was, I can't tell because I read it
because he said you bore me. If it would have been a little nice speech of like, Suzanne, I realized that I haven't been being true to myself and we just don't have the same interests and I've been faking interest and stuff and like, I think we should go our separate ways. And like, by the way, I'm bored by Mozart even. Then he would have kissed her on the cheek. I would have been like, fine. But after that speech, no.
Yeah. I also wish he hadn't said you bore me. I think it's like a little mean.
Yes. It was like, a little bit unnecessary. Finally, we're at the picnic.
I'm so into Dana Larson, the lead singer of the Droids outfit. She's wearing a red parachute silk jumpsuit. Love.
Yeah, that's cool. What Jessica has decided to do is the plan was there was going to be hot dogs, hamburgers, and fried chicken from a caterer. But instead of that, Elizabeth sees that there's tray after tray of peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. It's a good thing Robert's not there. And countless bags of potato chips. And Elizabeth's laughing, thinking about how Jessica spent the whole morning making all these 10 million sandwiches for everyone. But no one at the picnic seems to mind the simple fare. Everyone had eaten their fill. And although Elizabeth heard some jokes, she hadn't heard a single complaint about the food. And then what happens is, like, basically Jessica's hiding in a bush because she's so scared that, like, everyone's going to think this food sucks. But then Bruce gets her to come up on stage and she's like, oh no. But then he tells her, wow, he, like, ends up praising her in front of everyone and says, wow, Jess, like, it's so awesome how you took the money from the catering budget and, like, saved us so much money by making these peanut butter and jelly so that more of it can go to, like, the city fund or, like, whatever fundraising for the centennial. And she's like, wow, yep, just me being smart and good. And everyone claps, and it's a huge, huge success and wonderful outcome from the picnic. And everyone's happy with Jessica. So I loved that ending.
I
Did
love
you?
the ending for a couple of different reasons. I loved it because it showed Jessica's resourcefulness. It also like is one of the few times where I've seen a fundraiser where it's like, actually that does make sense.
Yes, it makes sense. And then we're introduced to this question of Lynn, this character of Lynn. And I don't think we've heard of her before, right?
Oh, we absolutely have not.
Elizabeth is surprised when she notices Lynn Henry standing apart from the crowd at one end of the bandstand, a junior that Elizabeth has never seen outside of school. She's very shy. Elizabeth doesn't think she seems to have any friends, and she's kind of wondering what's going on with Lynn. And she seems to Elizabeth to be transfixed by the music in a very intense way. And Elizabeth thinks to herself, well, maybe that's just my writer's imagination. Guess I'll never think about this again.
And then a flash of movement caught Elizabeth's eye. She turned and saw Lynn Henry once again, walking away from the bandstand. Instead of looking happy, however, Lynn now looked terribly depressed. Her head was down, and Elizabeth thought she saw the girl wipe a tear from her eye. Lynn was moving quickly through the crowd. Although Elizabeth didn't know Lynn well, she wondered if there was anything she'd do to help. Lynn? Elizabeth called out softly as the girl passed by. Her face was streaked with tears, and she turned to look at Elizabeth. But instead of responding, Lynn started to run off into the crowd. Elizabeth made a move to follow, but then collected herself. She had made her gesture of friendship. Elizabeth had to respect Lynn's desire to be alone. As the droids began to tune their instruments for the next song, Elizabeth wondered what it was that had made Lynn Henry so upset. It was strange that the girl didn't seem to have any friends. What made her so shy? The crowd began to cheer once more, but Elizabeth barely noticed. It must be terrible, she thought, to be in such a large group of people and not be friendly with anyone. Elizabeth's heart went out to the girl. Then and there, Elizabeth made a promise to herself. When she returned to Sweet Valley High on Monday, she would make an effort to get to know Lynn Henry a little better. Can Elizabeth help Lynn Henry overcome her shyness? Find out in Sweet Valley High number 28, Alone in the Crowd. But before that, next month, the Wakefield twins take a fabulous vacation on the French Riviera in spring break, the latest Sweet Valley High Super Edition. OM God.
I need your thoughts on both.
Okay, so my first thoughts, let's start with the Lynn of it all, the Lynn Henry of it all. It's just like, I wish that this could be more of a pro-Liz podcast, but you have gotten me so anti-Liz. I've been so radicalized that like, I have to see this as she doesn't really want to help. If she wanted to help, she would go help. But she had to respect Lynn's desire to be it's just like you see
all she did was like glance at her and say her name softly. Like she literally didn't make any gesture. She's like, well, I tried. I have to respect her boundaries. I'm like, what? Such a joke. Yeah, Liz is whatever, but I am still excited because I love that book. It's not anything. It's just another side character has to deal with some shit and gets better at it by the end book, but I just like it. I just love it.
And then my thoughts about the French Riviera are, OM God, I cannot wait. This is going to be fucking amazing. I can't wait for crepe play. I can't wait for, do they fly into Paris? Like, I'm trying to figure out what their itinerary is going to be because I'd love a little Eiffel Tower action if I could get it. I can't wait. I'm so excited.
Thanks for listening to Sweet Valley Hive, hosted by Robert Marks and Rebecca Pardo. For more, check out our Instagram at Sweet Valley Hive. Theme song by Yessie and artwork by Elliot Carroll.